This whole episode of my skin condition, leaving my corporate job and all of that thing, they actually happened for me instead of happening to me. I remember now looking back, right, the weight of others' perception and my own perception of myself really was so heavy. It felt heavier than the physical skin condition itself. I was just really in a nervous system that constantly felt overwhelmed. When you are so stuck in a routine job or a routine lifestyle, you just go with the flow, go with the motion, and you don't really pause and you don't really stop to think what actually nourishes me, what do I enjoy doing, even as a kid. What do I find magical about life, right? Just the way that I felt my body soften the first time in therapy, when I felt truly seen by another being. And even as I'm talking about this, I'm getting goosebumps all over. And that is really the power of being seen by a safe space. Hey guys, welcome back to the Original Magic episode 4. So today in this episode, I'm going to be sharing something that is really close to my heart, and that is trauma healing and self-discovery. What is a podcast series on the Original Magic without touching on these topics of healing, trauma, and self-discovery, right? And since it's October, which is also Mental Health Awareness Month, I just thought that it's really a good time to bring up this topic. It's a really timely one as well. And I find that every time during this time of the year, I would always do a sharing on my own personal story. It's been something that I've been doing for the last 3 years or so. I will take some moment to actually reflect on my own journey of recovery and rediscovery of the self. I feel that it really helps me to reflect on my own journey, and so this year is also no exception. And what I realized is that the essence of the story stays the same, but how I share it, how I put it together actually changes. And I think this is also a result of my own personal growth as well. And perhaps you may be feeling lost, maybe you're going through a certain grief, or maybe you have just been following Chill By Nette for a while now and you're just here to chill. I just hope that my story will also encourage you and give you some space to reflect on your own. So trauma healing to me, putting aside textbook definitions, is simply a natural way to unbecome who we are not, to return to the most authentic and free version of ourselves. And this is where freedom lives. And just a fun fact, do y'all know what is this word freedom? Free, it's about living according to one's will. And dom is a state. So when you put this word together, freedom, it's like you can sort of understand it as a state of being free, a state of acting according to one's will. And to me, this is what chill is about. It's a new way of being. And to actually live from this place, which some people call your highest timeline, the best version of yourself, right? Whatever that you call it, to live from this state, one will need to come to heal from past conditionings, past wounds, past hurt, past pain, past emotional residual, which those are what I call trauma healing. We will need to heal from there to free ourselves from those conditionings, to free ourselves from being tied down so that we can move in the direction of that state. So it's basically returning to your core essence. So it's a state of being where our soul moves openly without the state of old contracts or fear of not being enough. So it's really moving from an old paradigm to a new paradigm, okay? And that's what trauma healing is about at its core, at its very core essence. Okay, so this is not about textbook definition, but this is also not a definition that I came up with. It's a definition from my own lived experience. So I come to see that from my own experience, trauma healing is really coming to reclaim our own magic. It's really coming to reclaim safety, reclaim connection, reclaim the trust in ourselves, and I call all of that our magic. And in that process, in that whole process of coming to reclaim what we have lost, one step at a time, that process is what I call the process of self-discovery. So my life shifted completely in the year 2019, end of 2019, where I developed a physical skin condition, which actually forced me to step out from my corporate role. And I was working in human resources back then in a typical corporate job. In the family cultural context that I'm in, when you step away from a corporate role is something that is very unacceptable, right? And that further deepened the struggle that I was facing. And on hindsight, I realized that I've built a lot of my self-worth around external validation, which includes my appearance, my corporate identity, and even parental approval. And really, in that moment, I remembered, now looking back, right, the weight of others' perception and my own perception of myself really was so heavy. It felt heavier than the physical skin condition itself, which in itself was really quite unbearable because I had to get injections to calm the itch. And at that point in time, the doctors that I went to visit didn't know what was happening to me as well. It was a condition that just kind of came up from nowhere. Even though that was unbearable, I felt that the perceptions that came from others, which in turn led me to perceive myself in a certain way, was even more unbearable. I was having episodes of anxiety, depression, and there was a lot of grief involved as well because it was a totally new transition for me to survive without a corporate job. I was alone most of the time, isolated, and it didn't help that at that point in time, it was also during COVID period, right, where we are all going through a collective grief. So without those anchors like the perfect skin, the perfect career, the parental approval, I just felt that without these anchors, I felt so raw and exposed. And I just didn't feel like I know who I was anymore. On the surface, it may just look like a physical skin illness, but deep down, I think my whole identity actually crumbled. And this is what trauma does to us. Oftentimes, trauma is not just a one-time event in itself. It's not even an event, but it is the way it awakens old wounds, old conditionings, and deeper residual stuff within us. So when something happens to us, it's really not the event, but as a result of this event, what does it stirs within us? It could be past trauma, past conditionings that we have come to buy in. So in that emptiness, I really started asking a lot of questions, a lot of existential questions like who I am if it's not for my achievements, my appearance, or the roles that I play for others. And I was just really in a nervous system that constantly felt overwhelmed, okay? Because the pain was just so big. There was just so much old stuff that was coming to the surface, and I didn't know how to cope. And in these times of overwhelming pain and periods of depression or isolation, what I come to see is that having hope is just something that is so important. No matter how despair we are, no matter how much we just want to give up on life already, I find that the most important ingredient for us is to really have the hope, to know that things will not always be this way forever, and to know that we will be able to overcome this. But of course, easier said than done, right? During those times, having hope was just so difficult for me. It's because hope was so difficult that we don't feel that we will be okay. And I find that that is where energy givers comes in. Okay, even though hope can feel far away, we can still find the smallest things that nourishes us, that gives us energy in those moments of despair, in those moments of isolation, in those moments of disconnection. And for me, in those few months, those 9 months of unemployment, these are what my energy givers look like for me that helped me to eventually find back that spark and that hope in myself. Okay, so number one, I realized that I connected a lot more with nature. I realized that being in nature, going for long walks, I could take like really 10 km walks on a daily basis at that point in time. But really connecting with nature and just realizing that that actually gives me energy. It was really healing for me. And that was when I realized that I could actually breathe again. And it sort of serves as a new anchor for me when I didn't have my job, when I didn't have that healthy skin condition. Just bathing myself around nature, right? It sort of just gives me energy for some reason. So that's number one thing that I remember I do a lot. And the second thing that I did was I decided to reconnect with my passions and the things that gives me joy. And I think for a long time, I didn't know what I enjoy doing. When you are so stuck in a routine job or a routine lifestyle, you just go with the flow, go with the motion, and you don't really pause and you don't really stop to think what actually nourishes me, what do I enjoy doing, even as a kid, what do I find magical about life, right? So in that 9 months, I had a lot of free time. So I started Googling, how do you find your purpose, your meaning, and all of those things. I read a lot as well, but I come to remember that what I really enjoy is creation. I love art as a kid. I love to draw. I love to play. And that actually led me to start my own podcast channel. Chill By Nette podcast channel was actually birthed in 2021 in May, when I finally gave myself the permission to reconnect with what I find would be exciting for me. So yeah, starting this Chill By Nette podcast actually came from during one of my darker seasons of my life. And that was actually a way for me to make sense of what I was going through as well. It was sort of like a coping mechanism, you could actually call it. But I guess more than that, it was also a journey of self-discovery. It was also a journey for me to reconnect with my passion, my joys. And so it really comes hand in hand, isn't it? Like this recovery journey of really finding something to cope, but at the same time, you also rediscover yourself. And number 3 is that I took courage to see a therapist. Not immediately, it wasn't in the most destabilizing moments of my life, but as I took steps to really rebuild myself first, I was more stabilized already. I find that there were a lot of questions that came up. Even as I was doing my podcast channel documenting my recovery journey, I started to uncover a lot of the things in my subconscious, because the podcast channel kind of just acted like a journal, right? As you record episodes, as you uncover and share more about what is within you, you start to see patterns, you start to get a sensing that, wow, there is something that probably I will need to do deeper exploration in. That was when I wanted to actually reach out to a therapist to help me to even dive deeper into these experiences. It was from my therapeutic journey that I realized that healing is not just cognitive. Okay, there's a somatic component to it as well. There is an energetic component to it as well. And I'm very thankful for my therapist, because she didn't see therapy as just a transactional service, but it was a relationship that I built with her. And in her presence, I was able to feel that sense of safety, that sense of connection, that sense of what it could be possible. And also just the way that I felt my body soften the first time in therapy, when I felt truly seen by another being. And even as I'm talking about this, I'm getting goosebumps all over. And that is really the power of being seen by a safe space, being seen in a safe space. And number 4, I started to find slowness in my daily life. And that means giving myself a lot of time to rest. That includes physical as well as emotional and mental. A lot of the times we have this very negative connotation around rest, right? We feel that when you're resting, then you're not productive. But resting is such a important, not just productive, but it's also an important part of our journey. So in Chinese, we have this saying, right? 休息是为了走更长远的路. I can't agree with it more. I just didn't know why, I didn't give myself the permission to rest in the past. But I think it's also probably a lot of us are conditioned to not rest. And it's not that we don't want to rest, it's just that we don't know how to rest. And resting can feel very unsafe. Resting can feel very difficult. In fact, working more just feels easier, right? When we allow our body to slow down and we find stillness within, that process is actually an easier said than done process. And this is something that I don't find a lot of people talk about, but I just want to point out that there is magic in finding the ability to slow down, the ability to rest, the ability to reconnect with our breath and our body, because that is when we also reconnect with our magic that has always been there waiting to be seen by us. But of course, in this process, it's effortful, okay? It's not easy, because if it's easy, everybody would have done it, okay? So I would say that if you're also on this journey, take it really slow. You can go at your own pace as well. It doesn't have to be, oh, knowing how to slow down all at once. Okay, for me, it was really a gradual process. And even now, right, 5 years already, I think I'm still, is it 5 years? Okay, yeah. And even now, I'm still learning this process of really being with myself and giving myself the permission to slow down as I go. These four things, they were not just activities, they were my lifelines. So it was really a slow process, but once this process started, I started to see that it might be a lifelong journey of self-discovery that I sold myself to, And I really started to find purpose in my struggles. And, this whole episode of my skin condition, living my corporate job, and all of that thing, they actually happened for me instead of happening to me. What felt like an ending back then, right, was in fact an initiation process. One of the greatest gifts for me in therapy is really to come to reclaim myself and my inner magic and to build a self-trust that is so deep that self-love, self-care just comes as a natural extension of it, and I come to see that everything kind of just revolves around this theme of self-trust. So as I wrap up this episode today, I just want to remind us that trauma healing is not about coming to erase our past. It is about weaving it into the story of who we are. Not the whole story, but just one chapter, okay? So perhaps this is a question for you to carry into your week, and that is, where in your life do you feel called to unmute yourself, to be seen a little more fully, and to trust that it is safe to show up as you are? Bye!
Wow!
Thanks for chilling in. If you enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to subscribe. You can also connect with me on Instagram at Chill By Nette or my website chillbynette.com to find out more about chill therapy services. Have a great day, and we'll chill together again very soon.